Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to today's event on reporting data and digital transformation trends for Dynamics GP. We'll be looking at new data today on GP customer and partner views. My name is Jason Gumpert from MSDynamicsWorld. I'm hosting today's event, and I am very pleased to be joined by Anthony Deanna of deFacto for today's discussion. Just a little bit about the agenda as we get started here. We'll be doing just a bit of housekeeping to set things up and then get right into the rest of the event. We will be looking for your questions at any point, at a couple points throughout today's event, so please do enter them at any time. You should see a Q&A block to the right of the main presentation window. That's where you would add your feedback or ask questions, and we'll be making sure to cover any of that throughout. Then we'll be moving straight into a discussion of the survey results, what they say about the GP landscape. We'll be looking at the data, some of the participant feedback specifically, and then we also invite you to add your comments and ask questions about that. We'll be setting aside time in the second half to have our guest, Anthony, walk through more about deFacto CPM and his views on financial reporting for GP customers, and then obviously some more questions at the end before we wrap up. Okay, so Anthony, welcome to today's event. I thought I'd just give you a little bit of time here just to introduce yourself as we get started.
Great, thanks Jason, and thanks everyone for joining today. My name, as it says on the screen here, is Anthony Deanna, one of the co-founders of deFacto. deFacto sells just one product. We call it deFacto Planning. It is a fully integrated corporate performance management solution, so that includes budgeting, planning, consolidation, reporting, and analysis, all integrated into one solution, fully integrated with the Dynamics platform, of course with GP, but you can bring in data from other data sources as well, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But my background has been in this performance management space for over 20 years, working with various products like Hyperion and Cognos and performance point planning, if any of you were exposed to that from Microsoft. So if you have any questions on how we compare to other products and things like that, certainly don't hesitate to jump in and ask those questions as we go through throughout here. Thanks.
All right, great. And so let's really start to dive into some of the data and some of the questions and points it raises here. So we're going to be looking at information gathered through two surveys that MSDynamicsWorld ran independently, and looking to our reader base for their views. So we were really looking to hear from Dynamics users and partners. Between the two surveys, we gathered over 575 responses. They were run in May and September of this year. So May was where we really focused on BI and reporting specifically, and in September we we were looking for feedback on really themes related to digital transformation, which as we'll see here, really does overlay well. The BI survey, GP participation was just under a quarter, and Dynamics customers made up about half of that participant base, with the other half being independent consultants and people who work for VARs. And then with the digital transformation survey that we ran in September, it was about a quarter of the people said they were interested in GP. We asked that question a little differently, so it wasn't, it adds up to more than 100%. We just asked them which products they're interested in. And so about a quarter of the people said GP. I think it's interesting to note about 16% or 17% said they were also interested in the Dynamics 365 for business, which really didn't include too many GP people, I believe, but again, it's sort of in the same realm here. And then of those people, about a third were customers, and then about half, or a little more than half, were consultants and partners for that second survey. Okay, and yeah, just to maybe set our thinking around why this term digital transformation and why we even touched on it. We really did want to know, is it more than just a buzzword? Is it more than just sort of hype that you'll hear from some analysts? And so we really want to know what does digital transformation mean to Dynamics GP and other Dynamics users and partners? How is it actually shaping their plans for the future? And how do they sort of see things like their investments in technology, the shift away from toward digital automated processes, and the way that their teams work? How does it sort of fit into what they think of as digital transformation? So that's really how we approached our thinking in that way. And what it turns out is, as we'll see in the following slides, users are able to sort of frame what they're thinking about in terms of that term. So digital transformation is a meaningful term, unlike maybe some of the other buzzwords that have sort of floated in and out of the IT space over the years. It really seems to have be a good way to sort of capture where people see not only their own businesses going, but sort of the solution landscape, if you will. So products from Microsoft, the way they intend to work with partners. So yeah, I mean, we asked, and this is again a GP-specific slice of that most recent September survey. Is digital transformation influencing your organization? I was a little suspicious on this one, that maybe people would say, yeah, it's just a buzzword. But 80% said it's either a real thing or it's probably a real influence. And you'll see some of the GP participants said, they're looking forward to going paperless. That it was even pretty obvious that we shouldn't have perhaps even asked if that's a real thing or not. But I am glad we did, to be honest with you. And yeah, we're doing more and more digitally and less paper. So I think that really gets to what we had in mind as well when we talked about it. I'd also be interested for you, anyone on the line here, if you had a different interpretation, please feel free to share that too. I'd be happy to discuss. All right, so we also wanted to know sort of what some of the key Microsoft products that you think relate to digital transformation. And perhaps it's no surprise, but these three actually were unique again to GP users, but Office 365, Cortana Intelligence Suite, which obviously includes Power BI, Azure Machine Learning, Azure. I think Azure Logic Apps is in there as well. And then things like Power Apps and Flow, which are obviously important because those just hit general availability, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more of their importance when it comes to how data flows, how people make decisions with the data they have and the reporting tools that they have. And then ask, I'm sorry, okay, we're on the right side. And where it really matters to GP users sort of from functional and strategic capabilities that they have. And I wanted to bring Anthony in here. So, Anthony, you obviously hear analysts talk about themes for the future. Some of them have become sort of well embedded in the last year, and I think some of these trends are, kind of a continuation of what we've seen in the past years. Does it surprise you at all that reporting analytics sort of remain at the top of the list when it comes to how companies see themselves transforming what they invest in, where they are looking to sort of boost their abilities over the, this year and maybe in the coming years?
No, it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, you think about certainly what the people we speak with are doing, and most of the time is spending doing reporting and analysis. And over the years, that may have changed in that, I may be using different tools than what I used before, or I may be trying to automate more, but there's still that manual intervention that needs to get together, right, to bring data down into what typically is Excel, to piece together the reports that senior management is looking for, the board is looking for, whomever. And so when it comes to digital transformation, I think of that as just, kind of business process automation as part of that. And, people still struggle with the reporting end of it because no matter what happens, it's still difficult to get to information, or all the information is not in the place I need it, and so you wind up piecing it together, and it still is manual. So yeah, there's more tools, and yeah, there's better ways of doing things, but it's hard to adopt, and even the tools aren't great for everybody, if they're not either made available to them or they're not technical enough, so that self-service end of it, and then the security piece around it, I think, all those things make a lot of sense. And, you look at, the top really three, well, really the top five, you could say, or even all at some level, right? I mean, they're all kind of revolving around the reporting piece. I need security. I need reporting to get data from other systems. I need to, make it available to users so there is adoption, and take advantage of the software features. All those things are all interrelated, so the fact that reporting is at the top of the heap really is no surprise at all.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that comes to mind just in terms of what I know about GP users and what the GP community has been talking about in the last 6 months or a year. I mean, getting to the latest releases of GP, I know, is a huge deal, and I'd be interested if anyone in the audience, I know there's quite a few users on the line, want to kind of give us an idea of what version you're on. That would be interesting, and are you planning to upgrade to 2016 to 2016 R2? Because I think one of the things for GP specifically is interesting is how the reporting options and those other concerns actually change as you get into a more updated release, and how you can really change your strategy or your outlook on and your planning. Is that something that with your customers who also use GP, is getting to a newer version an important element of how they plan, Anthony?
Definitely, but in a way, it's almost counterintuitive in some regards. I think if you go back, and I apologize, I don't know all the versions, but if you go back to when FRX was really part of the scene, I think people were comfortable with FRX, and then they had to move to Management Reporter, and that was a big effort to get there. And when they did move there, I don't think they saw a lot of benefit from that. And so that's been a challenge. It's like, okay, now I've spent all this money, even though MR is free, right? I still have to spend a lot of time, potentially consulting time, whatever that is, to transform all my reports over and make them work again. And now I have perhaps the same or less functionality than what I had before. So is that really worth it? And now I'm being asked to kind of do that again, moving to JET or to another ISV. And now they need to make that plunge again. And are they going to get the value out of it that they need? And then, if you look at the second point here, it's integration of other systems. Well, reporting off GP is great, but is that the only reporting I need to do? And the answer is probably no. So I need to be able to, get at that data and do something with it, with ideally a common interface, and what's being provided tool-wise, regardless of the version, it's just changing, but it's just not solving the problem. And I think that's a challenge they're running into. So hopefully, as people are making these decisions to upgrade and move into these new systems, their partners are working with them, and they themselves are working to look at things on a much more broad perspective, broad around reporting, broad around BI, that it's not just about GP, it's not just about my GL, or whatever that might be. I need to look at it on a much larger perspective and say, okay, well, how do I get this to the masses? GP is just one piece of the puzzle, et cetera, and then hopefully they're making better decisions if they're going to now change their reporting and BI infrastructure. They're going to do it now more strategically than what I would say is tactically, where it just was attached to GP, So hopefully, if they're doing that, and folks on the phone, if you're going through that transition, I think it's worthwhile to kind of step back and look at that big picture, because, if you just move from X to Y and you're solving the same problem, well, you're going to have the same problem when you move to Y and put a lot of effort to get there. So hopefully, folks are thinking a lot more broadly these days after, I won't say being burned, but in a sense it is, because they aren't getting out of it what they put into it.
And I think some of those points get to this next slide here, asking how well organizations are currently meeting their reporting and analytics needs. And this is, again, some GP-specific data from what participants told us. More people here, I know we've looked at this data. I've looked at this data across the different products, and The meeting enough needs in the middle there might seem a little low. It's actually higher here than it is for other, a little bit higher, not much higher, but a tiny bit higher than for some of the other product users of other Dynamics products. Still low though. Meeting some needs but not enough is really kind of dominating, whereas almost no one says they're meeting all their needs. Yeah, and just some of the comments, specific comments from participants using Power BI and SSRS, noting that GP isn't robust enough for executive dashboarding, and I think that's where people are looking for flexibility in other tools. And is flexibility one of those areas where things fall short, Anthony? Are there other specific cases you would point to where people want more flexibility in what they need to report on, how they need to deliver analysis to the right folks inside the organization?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I see some of the points here around SSRS, and SSRS is a great tool and all, but I'm not sure that's a tool for the masses, because it just takes a lot of effort, typically a lot of technical effort to build these reports, and then there's really no flexibility in there, right? You can get a report and you maybe could change some parameters, but the structure of the report and things like that aren't really dynamic in any way. So I do think that's a big problem as far as the flexibility goes. I mean, I think, ideally you're providing users with the tools that they're most comfortable with. So if they're comfortable working in Excel and that's where they're going to get the most out of it, then you need to give them an Excel interface that really works for them. If they're comfortable in dashboards, and I think this is where Microsoft's going, certainly with Power BI, then give them Power BI and let them have these dashboards and do analysis that way, and I can use it, on the web, on my phone, etc. But I think that's the key, is giving people access to the data in a secure manner, but allowing them the flexibility to do what they need with it, where they're most comfortable. And to me, SSRS is not the answer. It may be part of the answer, but for certain things, but I don't think it is. I think Power BI certainly is going to move in that direction. Again, it's not going to be the full answer, but it's going to be a big part of that answer, and that gets back to what we talked about on the prior slide, is kind of thinking more strategically, more broadly. It's like, okay, well, if I want to standardize on Power BI as my dashboarding interface, that's great, but I still need to get my ducks in a row as far as my data and so forth, where I'm hitting behind the scenes. As far as the last point about GP being too small, that sounds like a different issue. If that it's not meeting certain needs, which may or may not be true, but I'm not sure the size of GP has anything to do with dashboarding. I mean, it's if the size is right for you and what GP provides is right for you, then the data in there is important to be able to report and analyze through dashboarding, through Excel, through whatever that is. So that last point might be a little kind of anomaly in that maybe they're not too thrilled with GP in general. But the point, I mean, I looking at the chart here, I find interesting. If you look at the top three, right? I mean, that's a pretty significant number. Meeting most needs, I mean, that to me is a good number. And meeting enough needs, I mean, you're almost halfway there, right, with those three, if you add them together. Not bad, I would say. So I think that's kind of a good sign. I think that is a bit higher than what I've seen in the past, that certainly, Jason, you and I have talked about in the past. So, it seems like people are making progress. I guess the only point I'm trying to make is, the tool any tool is, can be good and it looks great in demos and whatnot, but the reality is, you need to get your data together and have a plan around that for it to really be effective, because if you're pointing a tool to bad data, then you're really not going to accomplish much.
Yeah, let me bring up another slide here. I'm going to jump a little bit in terms of the charts, but I thought this one was relevant, asking if users have the tools they need to run reports. It's obviously a similar question. More users reported that their organization is improving its ability to get tools out to people who need it, but But there's really no one saying they have universal access, and I don't know if I think certainly there's. And we can see this in some of the other charts and other data that we have here today, but there is sort of a mindset of expanding access. Obviously, reporting and analytics are a priority and a key challenge. So I think expanding access to the right people is important here. in terms of enabling better access to tools, maybe that's something that I could ask you to comment on, Anthony. And I'd, again, love to hear if there's particular techniques people have found that really help to push the right tools out into the organization. But is that a question that comes up often, and are there ways that you try to tackle that with clients?
Again, coming from the tool is only part of the answer. Our tool of choice is Excel. I mean, when we talk to customers, we're dealing, in most cases, at least initially, in the CFO organization, so, controllers and financial analysts and so forth, they're living in Excel. So no matter where they're getting their data from, they're going to drop it into Excel anyway. So our, mantra from the beginning has been to build the best Excel interface possible, and really focus on that. So that to me is, if there's a single tool to focus on, that is the tool, because that's where people are going to ultimately start working on their data or start working on their analysis. Or if they needed to create a custom report, they're going to take that SSRS report, cut and paste it into Excel, and then modify it in the way that they could put into a slide or whatever they need to do. So I think that's the most important thing. But having said that, I don't think Excel is for everybody. And, there's executives, there's other analysts that just are not, as versed in Excel, nor care to get it versed in Excel, and that's fine. So you do need to provide tools that, and I think Power BI is a good example of that, to allow people to look at the same data. And I think that's what's key as well, is being able to have a common data platform where I can use Excel to go against it, or I can use Power BI to go against it, or the tool of my choice to go against that same data. Because the important thing there is, if I'm looking at a number, and we use this term, and it's been used a lot in the BI and CPM space, but it's that single version of the truth, right? I need to know that regardless of how I'm looking at that data, whatever window I'm looking into, I'm looking at the same value regardless of what that is. So if that's a net income number, if that's a revenue number, if that's the number of units sold number, whatever that is, I need to know that if I'm looking at it through Excel and my counterpart in marketing is looking at it through Power BI, that we are looking at a common number. So having that core data platform that's fully secure, right? So only the right people have the right access to it, but it's only there once. I don't need to replicate data, but I can use as many tools as I want to hit it wherever I'm comfortable. Then I think that's the most important, right? Because I know I'm going to get the right answer. We're all going to get the same answer, most importantly. But if I'm more comfortable going at it from tool A to tool B to Excel, whatever that is, that's fine. So I think that's what's key, is giving the people the choice to go after the data in the way they want, but the data has to be there and concrete for it to be meaningful.
I wanted to dive just at least for a couple minutes here into the question of partners' relationships with their users, and again, looking at what GP users said specifically there. And we may or may not have time to get the partner voice from some of that data in this half hour. We will be sharing some of that at a future time. But we asked how well your partner is advising you on BI reporting. And I also, you see on the right there, I put a little AX data just for contrast. So no guidance was really the leading answer for GP users. Good advice was second, so I think that's positive as opposed to poor advice, which not too many people getting poor advice. Just really get the sense that a lot of partners are either not able to sort of work that in. I think there's a lot of different potential ways to look at this. Partners either aren't getting to that discussion at all, or they're sort of just stepping away from it and not making those recommendations to their GP clients. Again, I also wonder, especially for the GP users who have let's say, gotten way behind on their GP version, that sort of limited that discussion if they're not staying up to date on the last one or two releases in the release cycle. But again, I'd love to get your sense on that, since you are working with GP customers and seeing where they've made their decisions on how to focus their reporting. What's your take, Anthony?
I mean, I find it interesting, certainly the contrast between GP and AX. I think some of that's attributable to the amount of time GP has been out there and the comfort level of probably the customer in working with GP. I think, in other words, it's kind of more of a known commodity versus AX is relatively newer and certainly more complex than GP. So certainly mean, reporting to me is, obviously I live it, but regardless of any ERP system, you need to get data out because, it's great that you can collect data, but you still need to be able to report and analyze that data. So the fact that no guidance is there or bad advice is there, really I find troubling at some level because, I think you need your partner to recognize, that this needs to be part of your requirement as you are implementing the solution. But the more I think about this, the more, it does depend on the maturity of the customer in working with it, because if I said, well, I'm using FRX today or I'm using MR today and I'm going to upgrade, from, versions of GP and MR is still going to be there tomorrow, I don't really need to think much about reporting if I'm happy with what I have, right? So that makes sense in a way that the partner is not giving any guidance because you already have what you want. Another way to interpret that is, because GP is in comparison to AX, I'm not saying GP is simple to implement, but it is in comparison, I would think, less time, less effort to implement most of the time. Maybe there's more pre-built capabilities, pre-built reporting, pre-built templates and SSRS reports and things like that again make the no guidance more okay, right? Because there's less that needs to be done. There's a lot more things that are there for me. So those might be reasons to see the no guidance in GP versus the AX piece. I think maturity, in my mind, is probably the key thing. The thing that worries me is the poor advice and the no guidance, because I would think you need, if I were going in and doing an ERP implementation or an upgrade, I would at least want, as part of that requirement, to be able to understand what the reporting needs of the customer are. And even if I don't address that in my first implementation phase of that ERP, it needs to be part of my strategy. And that's what worries me is, it gets back to what I was saying earlier. It's like you need to have a good reporting and BI strategy, regardless of what you're doing. And even if you're, it's down the road a bit, you need to really look at things from a much broader perspective. It's not just slapping a report writer on top of GP. I think it's a lot more than that. And that's what I hope people are starting to move to. I think partners, some are equipped to do that, some are not. The good partners who aren't equipped will at least bring in other partners, other, vendors that they work with to help them with that. What worries me is the people who aren't equipped but give bad advice to customers, and obviously that's not a good thing for anybody. But at least in this case, we're seeing, poor advice being much lower than certainly what we saw on the AX side.
Yeah, certainly less potential for harm there. I wanted to touch on a couple slides before we move on. We asked about skills, and I know that's another one that was really on my mind and thinking about what people are planning or how ready they feel for changes in the future. Do you feel your organization has the skills it needs for future digital business plans? Not too many think they do, but almost 60% say they have partially what they need, well, I guess about 70% says not yet, but they're planning and they're hiring. So I think people seem to have a lot of sense of what they actually need in terms of skills going forward. I want to share just one other question that was that was asked in September. In May, we asked her what the organizational skill levels were with different products. It's probably no surprise that SRS and SSRS and SSIS are at the top in terms of strong skills. And the Power BI is sort of in the middle right now with the other sort of Azure or Cortana Intelligence solutions sort of down near the end. I'm very interested to sort of watch this and see how it shifts over time, especially with, well, for a GP audience, especially with, I guess, the balance between Power BI and I guess SRS. Anthony, I don't know if you'd be watching for other tools. I would expect maybe over time Management Reporter probably to start sliding down that list. I think that'll take some time, though, as it sort of gets further away from the product itself.
Yeah, I would agree.
Support, right?
Yep, I would agree. I'm a bit surprised that like SSIS and SSAS aren't a bit higher, only because, again, talking about the legacy and that they've been around a long time and that the analysis cubes are part of GP. I would have thought SSAS at least would have been a bit higher. The fact that SSRS is actually higher than MR, I find interesting. So I guess that means to me a lot of people are moving, they're blowing past FRX and MR altogether and doing more SSRS, which I find interesting. And then even the fact that the Azure machine learning piece is as high as it is, I find interesting because of, we're not, although we integrate with ML, and I'll talk about that a bit when we do our piece, I haven't met anyone on the GP side that's really doing all that much with machine learning. So I find that interesting that that even is a blip on the radar, let alone, it's as high as SSIS and SSAS. So that's very interesting to me. But yeah, I would definitely expect that those things would go higher. MR would go lower. Power BI would definitely go higher over time as they keep, building features into that.
All right, one last slide I wanted to definitely get to here, and that's really just looking at priorities for GP users and where their priorities are. A couple are underlined here that just indicates things that are, I think, unique to the GP audience. So things like incorporating unstructured data is lower priority. Predictive capabilities a little lower for GP than they were for some of the other solution owners that we surveyed. But I really want to focus on the high priority, the must-haves. I think this might also be a good segue for you, Anthony. I'm interested to see how well those align with the priorities that either you place on the deFacto product or that you talk to when you talk to companies about their reporting needs. How those match up.
Sure. I mean, I think you're exactly right, Jason. When I look at the must-haves, I mean, these to me are must-haves for our product, but it's more, these to me are must-haves from the customers and prospects we talk to. I think the ability to get to more detailed data, but again, that speaks to the ability to have that core data platform to work off of. The Excel integration with the security, I've mentioned that a few times. Auditability, that's not a word we had seen up until now. I think that's important as well. Is the ability to understand who's doing what and when, and I think that's pretty important. But I'm glad it's as a must-have because that tends to fall by the wayside. Security is important, but the auditability, I'm glad people are talking about that. Self-service, again, very important. Trying to make that interface, again, given the choice of interfaces, I think is important. Budgeting, I'm glad to see that here. I mean, when people think BI, in my mind, BI is, I call it plug and chug BI. You kind of take data and you put it into a warehouse, you put it into Data Mart, you put it into a Cube, or you put Power BI on it, or some tool on it, and you can pivot and drill down and all that. That to me is what most people think of BI. Again, our approach, deFacto's approach, is really around performance management. So it goes beyond BI with the budgeting and the data warehouse automation, things like that. So it's good to see that budgeting is a must-have because our customers feel that way too. And they're not just reporting, they're not just doing BI, they're doing all these things, including budgeting, including the forecasting, including everything that's kind of in the important level also, the business logic and modeling. All these things are important to them. And again, we're not going to be a fit for everybody, I understand that, but seeing as customers are getting more sophisticated, I think those top three are moving more into the must-have because, budgeting tends to lead right into forecasting. And the more sophisticated you get with your business, the modeling becomes important because I need to understand where I'm going as a business, and what if I want to make an acquisition, or what if I want to divest a business, or what if I want to spin up a new product, or any of those things. I need to be able to model that and see what the impact is going to be. And I need business logic to carry that through, right, to see what that is. So that could be things like allocations and things like intercompany eliminations, those types of logic. To me, all those, are at the top of the important scale, and for our customers tend to be part of the must-haves as well. So, yeah, I mean, I see a lot of these, and very, to me, it really justifies what our customers are doing as well, and what I'm seeing in the marketplace.
Yeah, I'd be interested if there's any other high priorities that anyone in the audience is not seeing. That would be great to know. And at this point, I do want to kind of give control over to you, Anthony. second portion of today's event was to just let you share a little more about the deFacto solution and some of the things it can do, obviously that align with those priorities, which is great. So let me pass control over. We'll save some time at the end, again, for questions either about the solution you're going to see here or anything else about the data we shared and the trends that we were talking about. So you should now have control. All right, great.
I think people want to read my email. All right. All right, thanks, Jason. So what I plan on doing is just showing a couple slides to give you some background on deFacto planning. And then we're going to go into a demo about some of the things, and if you saw the must-haves and need to have kind of things. I think if there's anything that you guys want to see, please put the comments in. Jason will relay those to me. I'm going to do more of a generic kind of overview demo. We will cover kind of all aspects of the product at some level, but we're not going to get too deep into it. But if there is anything specific that anyone wants to see, certainly feel free to share, and we'll do our best to show that. As I mentioned earlier, deFacto planning is a fully integrated budgeting, forecasting, consolidation, and reporting application. So we only sell one product, and all these capabilities are fully integrated with them. So unlike some of our competitors out there that may have a report writer against GP to replace FRX or MR, a lot of our customers use deFacto to do that, but all of our customers are using all of deFacto. So typically it's not being used just as a report writer. They're taking advantage of the fact that you can do all these other things with the product and really running with it. So there's something that, to me, that's very important. Again, as you're thinking more broadly about your BI strategy, I think you need to incorporate some of those items that were on that must-have list, the budgeting, the forecasting, et cetera, as part of that. And so that's really the angle we took when we developed the product. Just from a positioning standpoint, BPM Partners ran the survey. They are a performance management analyst. This is all they do, focus on the performance management space. So you can see where deFacto is positioned very well. The reason we're not in the proven is that we're just not competing with the number of customers that these guys have. You need it to be in the thousands of customers here. We're just not quite there yet. But we have a very substantial customer base and continues to grow. And more importantly, they continue to be very happy. So, and that's what we're seeing here. So we're at the top of the customer satisfaction level. If you see the kind of big three that we compete against at the higher end, you could see their customer satisfaction levels are quite low. And the reason for that in a lot of cases is expense, is complexity, and so forth. So, with the fact that we try to make it priced right, but give you the capabilities you would get in these types of applications, and obviously, our customers are very happy with that. And so we're continuing to move in that direction. From an architectural standpoint, as I said, we take a different approach than some of our competitors. We do have a separate data mart that we bring data into, and we do this for every opportunity. So it's not like we use a report writer in some cases and then have a data mart in other cases. Every customer is handled in the same way. However, we can bring in, so we have connectors for Dynamics that bring that data into deFacto, but you can bring in other data sources as you wish. And you can have as many data sources as you like and bring those all into one data mart. So if I had, my GL data, let's say from GP, and maybe I wanted to bring sub-ledger data in, or I wanted to bring analytical accounting data in, or I wanted to bring HR data from my payroll processing system, or point-of-sale data from my point-of-sale system, whatever that might be, to marry that with my financials, I can easily do that as well. So deFacto is really good at that. We use both the relational database of SQL Server and the Cube technology of analysis services. And the reason for that is that they're each good at certain things. So the Cube is really good at that speed of thought reporting, that easy drill down, that great instantaneous response, scalability, very important. But the relational database is really good at other things like business logic that we talked about, allocations, foreign currency, intercompany eliminations, all those kinds of things. Partial ownerships are a good example. So the relational database is going to be much better at that. Now, we integrate those for you. We manage all that for you. In fact, I'm going to show you, if we have time, just a quick, easy way how we can manage the application and how easy it is. But what speaks to that is who manages the application are our customers, and it's almost always a financial or business analyst that is the administrator. It's not an IT function at all. One thing I wanted to point out as well is that we do have an integration with the Azure Machine Learning platform for predictive forecasting. So, what I'll show you today is more about the way our traditional customer uses deFacto for budgeting and forecasting, but we also have a native integration built into the Azure Machine Learning platform and or SQL 2016 that allows you to do predictive forecasting through a statistical or mathematical model to generate predictive forecasts off your data. So really cool stuff, and again, you can really get it at the push of a button without having to really build anything. deFacto just has that native integration, and what happens is you kind of push your actuals to the machine learning platform, again, just by hitting a button. It teaches the model about your data, generates a forecast off of that, and then brings those results right back into deFacto. It's just another scenario. So if you think about my report that has actual budget forecast as scenarios, I could just have an ML forecast or machine learning forecast in there as well. As I mentioned, Excel is our main interface. We're going to show that in the demo today. Our focus from day one has been giving the best Excel interface we can. So we continue to enhance that, continue to make that better. But that's really where our customers are living 12, 14 hours a day. You saw the customer satisfaction levels. I mean, that's exactly why, is that they're not exporting data to Excel or copying and pasting stuff. Everything is living in Excel. However, we do have web interfaces as well that integrate with deFacto, our own web interfaces, and Power BI natively connects to deFacto in addition to that. The nice thing too is, as I mentioned, it's one centralized model, one level, one set of security, whether I'm using my Excel interface, Power BI, or deFacto's web and mobile tools. It doesn't matter. So everything is in one place, and so you really get that single version of the truth. I'm not jumping all over. Okay. All right. You'll hear, the word model, and we saw that in the, some of the needs that customers have, and that gets back to what I was saying. The ability to model my business. I mean, if you think about any ERP system, GP being one of them, they're great, or they're made for. Some of them are better than others, but they're made to collect data, right? They're made for transaction processing. They're not made to make decisions at a managerial level, right? That's why people are manually creating reports and doing analysis, is to help make those decisions. So what deFacto does, it takes that core data, that transactional data, brings that into a platform that you can model and make those decisions off of. And that to me is very key. And this just, examples, like I said, are the ability to make an acquisition. I want to analyze what this acquisition is going to look like inside of deFacto before I make the acquisition. So I can look at my core business today, and then I can look at it with the acquisition tomorrow and see where the overlap is, see where the redundancy might be, see where the opportunity might be. So AT&T Mobility is one of our longest using customers, and when they bought DirecTV, when they recently made the bid for Time Warner, that's exactly what they did. They had their AT&T data in their deFacto model, and then they were able to look at their data with and without Time Warner to see where all those overlaps are to help them model where they're going to go. So the nice thing about modeling is then once I model it, I can then analyze the impact of that model and then have the ability to plan around it and forecast around it. And this cycle really never ends because your business is always changing. I'm always thinking of new things I may want to do. I hired a new general manager. I may want to see what a reorg might look like with that new general manager. So I want the ability to be able to model those types of things inside of deFacto. Okay. The other thing I'll just list here, and I'm not going to go into this in any detail, I just want you to see some of the built-in functionality of deFacto. All this is there as part of the application. There's no additional fees for any of these things. And we're going to demo a few of these right now, but I just want you to see all these pre-built capabilities. And certainly don't need to use them all day one. But the nice thing is, let's say you're a domestic company today, and tomorrow you make an acquisition in Canada or Mexico, and now all of a sudden you need foreign currency. In some cases, you may need to go out and buy another reporting tool, right, because it doesn't handle, the one you have doesn't handle foreign currency, or at least not well, with the fact that you just turn that feature on. So that's what's really nice too. As your needs grow and change, deFacto is there for you to grow and change. And if we can handle a company like AT&T Mobile, I'm guessing we can handle most companies that are on the phone today, and That's really the key, and we do have a ton of GP customers already. Okay, so let me jump to the demo here. As I mentioned, we're going to focus on Excel, although this is something I'll get back to in a second. So deFacto, here we are, just one interface in Excel. This is the only ribbon our users will see, and it's very, very easy to use. So all I need to do is go to my shared library, and you'll see everything is Excel-based. If I open up a report, so here's an example of an ad hoc report, you'll see that it refreshes almost instantaneously. So it opens up blank and then refreshes based on my security levels. Now what I'm looking at here, I have my accounts in my rows and my time in my columns. And everything is driven off of my current view that's here. So if I look down, right, I can see I have my pre-tax income at the lowest level, right? That's what everything rolls up to. And that's what I'm looking at here, is giving me the pre-tax income, right? And then I can drill down automatically as far as I want to go. Now the nice thing is I've developed this so this represents like a 4-digit account segment in GP, but these roll-ups and so forth happen automatically for me. I define them once, and then everybody shares in that. The other nice thing, too, is I don't need to define a lot of different formulas or anything like that. If I look here, I have cost of goods. I can see the account type of that is an expense. I have revenue. My account type is income. Same thing, gross margin, account type of income. So just by defining the account type in deFacto, it does the math for me. It says revenue minus cost of goods equals gross margin. There's no formula I have to define or anything like that. And in fact, when I go into my numbers here, you can see there's no formulas or anything inside of deFacto. I'm bringing the data in just as it is calculated in the database. So that eliminates any chance of fat fingering formulas or anything like that. So that's what's really nice about deFacto. Yes, I can use Excel formulas to my heart's content, but I don't need to because I'm defining these things one time and then everybody's sharing in that. So again, it gets back to that single version of the truth. And if I want to do things like, hey, I want to see quarterly data, I just say, hit show parents, oops, not columns, wrong one, show parents, and then my quarters pop up. And it's not just hiding and hiding, it's actually requerying the data. If I said I want to zero suppress my data here, that's all I need to do. Now I'm zero suppressing my data. One of the things that our GP customers always struggle with is the ability to do a consolidated income statement. Well, if I just change this to my company dimension, just like that, I have a consolidated income statement. So it's that simple. If I change this, well, instead of 5 levels down, I just want to go 2 levels down, it'll just give me 2 levels down. And again, just data, just values that come back. And the beauty of that is I could email this report to any one of you on the phone, and there's nothing you need more than Excel to read the report, right? I don't need to copy paste values. I'm not exporting data. I'm giving you the data exactly as it is, including all the roll-ups and everything else. Again, there's no formulas here. The other nice thing, by using what we call this expansion, right, is saying give me pre-tax income and drill down on that. It's basically saying, let's say a new account were added into GP between fringe and payroll taxes. Then as soon as I refresh my report, it would show up here automatically because of that drill down, and it would be formatted correctly. Just like it doesn't, the range doesn't, I don't have to give an account range or anything like that. I just drag it to where I want it to go inside of deFacto, and just like that, it shows up here and is formatted correctly. Okay, another quick example of how we use reports. Here's a book example. And what I'll show you is this is a pretty standard way that our customers use deFacto. So here you can see I have actual versus budget, $%, right? Month, year to date versus last year. Then you can see when I change from May, let's say to April or to June, when I refresh this, it's almost instantaneous that this refreshes. But what you're not realizing is it's actually refreshing 5 reports when I refresh this one report. So it's refreshing all 5 of them in the workbook, and it's doing it that quickly. Okay? Now the other thing I want you to see here is, once again, it's just a value that comes back from deFacto, right? Even the actual versus budget is a value that comes back. However, this is a calculation we're doing in deFacto, and it's an intelligent calculation. So remember that account type we were looking at, it looks at, is it income, is it expense? And if it's an income account and it's higher, then it shows as a positive. If it's an expense account and it's higher, then it shows as a negative. So it's not an increase-decrease, but a better-worse calculation. Okay? But I can also use Excel formulas here. Okay? So all that's right there at my fingertips, and I can drill down on any value. So here I can see I have an income statement. If I wanted to drill down, I just say investigate, and I say, you know what, I want to see all the entities underneath here. I say okay, and just like that, I can drill down to all my entities. If I wanted to see all the products underneath, this is a car manufacturer, I just double click on product, and now I see all the products that exist underneath there. I can do that on any report, whether I build it from scratch or I take an existing template. All right, I know I'm going a little fast here, but I want you to see budgeting quickly here. So when I go to look at a budget, I just want you to see, so here's a dashboard we use, and you can see I have my actuals versus budget versus a corporate budget and then versus forecast. And I have full workflow capabilities. So if you wanted to go through an approval for a budget process or a forecast process, you absolutely can do that. And you can report on the statuses right here in Excel using the same reporting as we just did on the financial side. So that's what's really nice too, is the ability to report on statuses just in Excel in the same manner. Now, again, I'm going to go a little fast here, but I can see that New York has no data. So when I refresh my data here, you'll see that all this updates. And again, these are just standard Excel charts working with deFacto, right? So there's no magic here. But I can see that I have no budget data, and I want to enter budget data. So I'm just going to click on this. And what it does is it opens up this template. You can see nothing has been emailed, right? I don't need to email anything. No one needs to manually consolidate it. It's all done for me automatically. So here I can see these are my current year actuals, and you could have as much data. We have customers that want to see 3 years of prior year actuals. We have customers that want to see 20 years of a long-range operational plan in the pharmaceutical industry, where they want to see 20 years that they're going to budget for. But we're looking at just a very simple 6-month view here. So I could say, you know what, I want to take this year's actuals and divide by 12, or I want to put a value in. Whatever I want to put in here, I could even comment on this, right? And then all I do is say send data. And now what it's doing is it's writing the data back for New York, right? But it's also immediately consolidating the data up to the East US worldwide and on every other dimension as well. So all that's done for me. You can also see that I have no formulas here. That's why nothing's showing up here. But when I refresh, I will then see the calculation done for me automatically. Now, of course, I could put it in an Excel formula. This is an Excel formula, so I can use Excel. However, we're saying we already calculated this in the database, so why do we want to do that any further? We're going to let deFacto calculate that for us. One of the other important things we talked about is security and auditability. Well, I can right-click on any value here, right, and say audit log info, and it will give me the full history of this value, who changed it and when. So just now, at 12:52, right, I changed it from 0 to 5,000, right, and the administrator changed it. I can see the full history of that value. So when people come back to you during a budget or forecast and say, I don't know where that data came from, it wasn't me, right, now you have the full ability to audit that data. So that's important as well. And then you can get into much more deeper budgeting and forecasting capabilities. We have full salary planning. If you want to do salary planning down to an employee level, you can set up all your drivers and things like that. And all that will generate all your salary and fringe. And the deFacto business logic, again, there's no formulas here. deFacto is calculating all that in the business logic engine. And again, we can spend more time on this. So if you're interested, I'd be happy to show you, but we're running out of time here. One last point I want to make is just on the modeling piece. I can see here I have my management organization where I can see the worldwide US East, right? Everything is regionally based, but I could take the same company data, right? So it could be companies inside of GP, and I can organize it in a different way. So the same data, right? I can see here's New York now rolling to sales, and here's Boston rolling to G&A. So I can have any of these alternate hierarchies. This is where I was talking about the pro forma view and all that kind of thing. So all that's available to me. And I just want you to see how easy it is to change that. So this is the deFacto administrative interface. And all I have to do is say, check it out. And I can export this to Excel and modify it there, all those kinds of things. But very simply, I'm just going to say, you know what? I want to take Boston and move it to the West. Right? I'm a Yankee fan, not a Red Sox fan, so I want to get rid of them. That's all I need to do is drag and drop it, and I'm done. So this is what I was saying before, is from an administrative standpoint, it is a business or financial analyst that has the ability to manage this application. So that's all I need to do. I check it in and deploy, and everything is done for me. No IT involvement, nothing like that. It's all managed for me right here. Okay? Do we have another minute, Jason, or are we good?
Yeah, we're at 5 minutes right now to the top of the hour. So
Okay.
please continue.
Okay. All right, the last thing I'll show, I talk about Power BI. Well, deFacto has a native integration with Power BI as well. And you can see we have some examples here, but this is hitting, all these tiles are showing hitting deFacto on a live basis. So I can click on this, and this is going directly against my deFacto model, the same model that we just hit in Excel. Okay, I have full drill down capabilities if I wanted to drill down. And again, this is just using the deFacto model, the cube, and allowing us to drill down on that and up, right? So that's what's really nice. I could change this from actual to budget, right, or actual versus budget, anything like that. All those things you saw that I was looking at in Excel, I have the ability to do here. The other thing quickly I'll show you is we talked about the machine learning piece. Sorry, I'm not exactly super versed in the Power BI world. Whoops, as you can see. What I wanted to do, if this comes up, yeah, okay, is show you just the machine learning piece. So this isn't showing all that much, but what it is showing here is that I have the ability to, the resolution's not that great, but what it's showing here is I can see my actual, my forecast, and then my machine learning forecast. It's just another scenario inside deFacto. So to me, that's a big deal about scenario management. So if we go back just into the Excel piece, and we can close with this, I can look, and although I have different scenarios, I can have as many of these as I need. So here I have my actual, my budget. I could have my machine learning forecast. Most of our customers that do forecast, they forecast on a monthly basis. So you can see the various scenarios you can have. The nice thing is I can copy data from one scenario to another. I can secure any one of those. So if I'm going through a budget process and I have multiple passes at it, I can copy one pass to another, lock down the first pass, so no one can make changes to it, and then run comparisons to pass 2 versus pass 1, all those kinds of things. So all that's available to me in deFacto. Any naming conventions, any organization, the size, the number of dimensions, all that's entirely up to your requirements, and that's what we work with you on. And of course, we have pre-built connectors for GP that fast forward all those things, but there's also things that make life better than what just GP provides, and that's something we can help you with. So with that, I think that's a good place to stop right now. If you do want to see more info, certainly reach out to myself or Jason, and we can arrange for that.
Great. So I'd like to let folks ask any remaining questions they have. Let me just take control back here as well. And yeah, question time. I'm also going to just share one other thing as we get as we sort of start to wrap up here. Anthony, I am curious about the machine learning aspect that you were showing. Is that getting easier for companies to start making to actually start implementing, I guess I should say, in their own planning to bring elements of that into their reports?
Yes, I think Microsoft is trying to make that easier and easier for people. One example of that is what used to be on the Azure Machine Learning platform. Now, some of that capability, especially the R coding, is now made available in SQL 2016. So they're trying to make what's available on the Azure platform more readily available to users. Now, it still requires some manual intervention if you don't have a tool like deFacto that automates all that. Now, the nice thing about having it in SQL 2016 is that I don't need to set up anything on Azure. The downside of that is it's limited in you know, if I'm looking at lots and lots of data, I want the platform, the Azure Machine Learning platform, to be able to handle that versus a server I may have or hosted somewhere. So that's the only trade-off. But what's great about the SQL 2016 is that as you're cutting your teeth, learning about the machine learning and R coding and things like that, you can start kind of on-premise or wherever you're most comfortable on a hosted 2016 environment, or even on Azure if you wanted. But then if you want to take full advantage of the Azure Machine Learning, you can then migrate that up to that platform to get the full computing power of Azure. So you have the option of going either way. But SQL 2016 is a good starting point. And to your question, Jason, I think that's where Microsoft is going, is trying to make that a bit easier to use.
Good to know. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up there. We're at the top of the hour. Anthony, thanks for taking the time to comb through the data with us today and to show us a little more about the deFacto solution. Appreciate that.
Same here, Jason. Thanks, everybody.
And a couple of last points. If you do want to reach out to Anthony, obviously there's his email address, and there is a little form that you'll see under that media viewer section if you want to just make a request quickly before we depart today. We also do have a quick feedback survey that will pop up after you leave. We really appreciate any feedback you can give us on what you thought of today's event, what you thought of the data, any other suggestions for the future. We also recorded today's event. We'll be making that available too in the near future. So thanks again. Have a great day, everybody. That concludes today's event.